Hello again, my fiber friends. I'm ReRe, and this is Exploration Crochet, part of the Yarn Over Hook network. This week, we're talking about one of those organizations that most crocheters have interacted with without necessarily realizing it. If you crochet in modern America, this organization has almost certainly shaped your crafting life. We're talking about the Craft Yarn Council of America, now usually called the Craft Yarn Council or the CYC. If you have ever looked at a yarn label and recognized a familiar weight symbol, followed a standardized crochet chart, or picked up a hook package expecting the sizing to make at least some sense, then you have already been living in a world the CYC helped build. At its core, the Craft Yarn Council is an industry trade association. It represents the businesses and publishing side of yarn crafts, yarn companies, tools, and accessory makers, as well as publishers and consultants. It sits in that space where industry, education, and standardization all meet. And that matters because the CYC's relationship to crochet has always been shaped by that role. It was not created to be the soul of crochet culture. It was created to help the yarn world function more clearly and cleanly. It's part of the infrastructure that helps modern crochet make sense. It's a collaborative industry formation formed out of what they saw as a practical necessity. So this week, we're looking at who started it, why it was created, how it was developed, and what exactly it has meant to the crochet world. Because this is one of those stories where the institution is not flashy, but the impact is enormous. So, grab your hook, pull up a loop, and let's get into it. So who created it? This is not really a story about one dramatic visionary standing on a hilltop shouting, "Standardize the yarn!" The best supported answer is that the CYC was started by the yarn industry itself. The public record points to a coalition of companies and related stakeholders, yarn companies, publishers, manufacturers, and industry professionals working together. The Council's own materials make that pretty clear. Its standards pages explain that member organizations work together to create guidelines and symbols for yarn labeling, hook and needle labeling, and pattern presentation. This was a collaborative industry formation. And honestly, that makes sense, because the problem they were trying to solve was bigger than any one person. At its core, the CYC was created because the yarn industry needed to do three things at once. First, it needed to standardize communication. Second, it needed to educate consumers and teachers. Third, it needed to grow and stabilize the yarn craft market. That is essentially what the Council's standards work, teaching programs, and promotional efforts all point toward. And historically, that makes perfect sense. If you are a yarn company, you want customers to understand what they're buying. If you are a publisher, you want readers to follow your instructions. If you are a teacher, you want a clearer baseline for teaching. And if you are the industry as a whole, you want people to feel confident enough to pick up knitting and crochet in the first place. That is really what the CYC was built to do: help the whole system function more smoothly. Plain talk, the CYC started because the yarn industry wanted a shared structure that would make knitting and crochet easier to teach, easier to publish, easier to shop for, and easier to grow as a market. And when did all this happen? Public organizational profiles placed the Council's formation in 1981. So, let's roll back the clock to the early 80s. For reference, this was the era when the commercially available cell phone weighed about 2.5 pounds, cost nearly $4,000, and took 10 hours to charge for 30 minutes of talking. Also, Personal computers with graphic interfaces were becoming the shiny new toy. Nintendo and Sega were arriving. Walkmen were clipped to hips. Camcorders and disposable cameras were in hands. MTV was new, and yes, children, it actually stood for music television. And LCD screens mostly lived on watches and calculators. By that point, crochet and knitting were already well established crafts. The issue was not that the crafts were new. The issue was that the market around them had gotten more complicated. Yarn companies were making more products, publishers were releasing more patterns, tools and accessories were expanding, national retail chains were growing, magazine culture was strong, and instruction was spreading through classrooms, booklets, and print media. And when a craft marketplace gets bigger, one thing happens very quickly. Inconsistency becomes a problem. Different brands described yarn differently, different publishers used different symbols, different hook and needle systems confuse consumers, different teaching methods create friction for beginners. Suddenly, the very growth of the craft industry started making the craft harder to navigate. This is the problem the CYC emerged to help solve. Its standards materials explain that publishers, fiber companies, and needle and hook manufacturers work together to create more uniformity in yarn labeling, hook and needle labeling, and pattern presentation. As to who those companies and manufacturers were specifically, the record isn't clear. The exact founding roster is unidentified, but I could find later membership evidence for Lion Brand, Spinrite, which is also Yarnspirations, and their brands, which include Bernat, Karen, Peyton's, and Lily Sugar and Cream. Additionally, I found evidence of early membership for Red Heart and for Coates and Clark. So the council began as a collaborative body designed to make the yarn world easier to understand and easier to operate within. Why does this organization matter for crocheters specifically? For a long time, crocheters had to navigate a truly impressive amount of inconsistency. Terminology, charting, thread sizes, hook numbers, and pattern conventions that did not always seem particularly interested in agreeing with one another. And one of the places the CYC made its initial mark was through the standard yarn weight system. If you are a crocheter, you probably know exactly the little symbols I'm talking about, because in the before times, a beginner might see sport weight in one place, or baby yarn in another, or number 3 light somewhere else. And that same crocheter would be expected to act like this was all perfectly normal. One pattern might use one symbol system, another might use different iconography, and a third might simply assume you were born knowing the vocabulary. Hook sizes might be labeled one way in one country and something entirely different somewhere else. The CYC helped make that whole system more coherent. Those little icons and category names became part of everyday craft literacy. They helped yarn labels, patterns, and instructional materials speak the same language more often. Now, no system is perfect. Crocheters know very well that there are still myriad hook sizes out there, and that not all weight 4 yarns behave the same way. And no tiny number on a label can fully explain drape, ply, halo, bounce, fiber content, or stitch definition. And it certainly can't give you a heads up as to whether a yarn is about to become your new favorite or your newest enemy. But the system did give crocheters a starting framework, and frameworks matter. They matter for beginners, they matter for publishers, they matter for stores, they matter for teachers. So one of the CYC's biggest contributions to crochet is this. It helped build the vocabulary through which modern crocheters compare materials, interpret patterns, and choose projects. As stated, its standards cover things like yarn weight categories, hook and needle information, steel hooks, and crochet thread guidance, as well as care symbols and project levels. And honestly, getting yarn categories under some kind of control and making hook information more legible was probably the easy part. Because then came the charts. The Council played a significant role in crochet chart standardization. And this is where things get especially interesting because crochet has always had a slightly complicated relationship with standardization. There is more than one way to crochet. Crochet is a global craft, and global crafts don't always sit down politely and agree on one single visual language. Now, I will be devoting a podcast entirely to the evolution of crochet charts in the future. But for now, what you need to understand is that charts matter a lot. Charts are one of the great translation tools of the crochet world. They let a crocheter in one language follow a pattern designed in another. They give visual shape to stitches. They reduce dependence on long blocks of text, and they clarify structure in ways words sometimes simply cannot. Now, the CYC did not invent crochet charts, but by helping standardize chart symbols, it supported one of crochet's most powerful communication tools. It helped stabilize how many American crocheters and publishers encountered charts, and that is a significant contribution. Now, if you're not fluent in crochet charts or just want to refresh or tighten your knowledge, I'd strongly encourage you to check out the Reading Basic Crochet Charts cheat sheet available from Yarn Over Hook. It'll also help you make your own flashcards. I'll leave the link in the show notes. And having done all that, the CYC's influence on crochet was not just technical. It was also educational and public-facing. One of the clearest examples is the Council's Certified Instructors Program, which is designed for teachers with strong crochet or knitting skills. It aims to support more consistent instruction. And from an historical perspective, that matters because crochet has long lived in two teaching worlds at once. There is the intimate, informal world of crochet, mother to child, friend to friend, church circle or library circle to newcomer. And then there is the formal teaching world, classes, workshops, written curriculum, and teacher credentials. The CYC helped strengthen the second world. It supported the idea that crochet instruction could be organized, evaluated, and recognized as skilled professional work, and they still offer crochet instruction certification. And the Council's relationship to crochet didn't stop with standards and teaching. It also extended into promotion and visibility. That matters because crochet's place in the modern yarn world has never depended only on charts, labels, and standards. It has also depended on being seen. The CYC helped keep crochet publicly visible through campaigns, events, teaching efforts, and broader industry messaging. Which brings us to the CYC and the Crochet Guild of America. The two have overlapped in meaningful ways for years. The CYC has promoted the Crochet Guild as part of its National Crochet Month activities, and historically, Crochet Guild materials note that in 1998, the CYC assumed administrative duties for their organization. Full disclosure, I am a member of the Crochet Guild of America, and I participate in 2 local chapters here in my state. And all that tells us something important. The CYC was part of the support structure around the craft. The Crochet Guild represented crochet as a dedicated community and identity. The CYC represented the standards, teaching systems, business infrastructure, and promotional machinery that helped support the environment in which crochet could thrive. The CYC's relationship to crochet is also visible through Warm Up America, which the Council features prominently. That program distributes hand knitted and crocheted blankets, clothing, and accessories to people in need across the country. And that connects directly to one of crochet's strongest cultural traditions, making for comfort, care, and community. Crochet has long been associated with practical generosity. So when the CYC is connected to a national effort like Warm Up America, it is not just participating in charity, it is participating in a very old yarn craft truth that handmade work can be both practical and nurturing at the same time. In closing, to be clear, neither the CYC nor the Crochet Guild of America define all of crochet culture. They didn't invent the folklore, the family traditions, the regional quirks, the artistry, or the experimentation that crocheters bring to the craft. But the CYC's influence on crochet is undeniable because a craft does not only live in inspiration, it lives in infrastructure. And the CYC helped build infrastructure. It helped shape the technical, educational, and promotional framework of modern American crochet. The CYC helped make crochet easier to publish, teach, learn, and to recognize in the marketplace. So if there's one takeaway from this episode, it's this. No, the CYC is not crochet, but it is absolutely part of the structure that helps modern crochet make sense. So, are you or your organization a member of the CYC or the Crochet Guild of America? And let's be honest, how are you when it comes to crochet charts? Let me know in the comments. And I'll be sure to leave the links for the Stitch Library and the CYC website and the Crochet Guild of America website in the show notes. I'm ReRe. Thank you so very much for listening. This has been Exploration Crochet.